Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive. Today we are looking into something that kind of feels like it's ripped straight from the pages of a political thriller. We're talking about potential candidates for really important legal positions. If Trump ends up having a second administration, and what makes this even more interesting is our source. It's a leaked internal document, kind of like we've got this backstage pass to all the behind-the-scenes power plays.
What's really got my attention with this document is that it seems to come directly from Trump's inner circle. It lays out picks for some of the most powerful roles in the legal world, like who they might want as Attorney General. It gives us a peek behind the curtain into who might be calling the shots when it comes to the law if Trump gets back into the Oval Office.
Okay, so let's break this down a bit. The document is called Transition Planning, Legal Principles, and it reportedly has input from Boris Epshteyn, one of Trump's most trusted advisors. But here's where things get really interesting. One name on the shortlist for Attorney General is Judge Aileen Cannon. Now, you might remember her from early this year. She's the judge who dismissed the criminal classified documents case that was against Trump.
Right, and that's exactly why her being on the list is creating such a buzz. Just to jog your memory.
Yeah.
She dismissed that case because she said that Special Counsel Jack Smith's appointment was unconstitutional. That decision is currently under appeal. But what's especially interesting is that her name was added to this shortlist after she made that ruling.
Wait, hold on. So she makes a ruling that's good for Trump, and bam, her name's on the shortlist for Attorney General. That's, it's a lot to think about. And didn't Trump publicly praise Cannon for her decision?
He did. And there's another interesting development, too, just last week. The man who's accused of trying to kill Trump at his golf course. He requested that Judge Cannon recuse herself from his case. His lawyers argued that there's a good chance that Trump would promote her if he wins the election.
Wow.
Talk about a conflict of interest. Doesn't this bring up a bigger question? I mean, presidents have always tried to influence the Justice Department a little bit, but this list and the timing of when Cannon was added, it makes you think they want to have total control over it. What could that mean for the rule of law in this country?
That's a really important question, and one that we should explore more. Judge Cannon isn't the only name on this list that's raising eyebrows. There's also Jeffrey Clark, who was recently indicted in Georgia for his alleged role in trying to overturn the 2020 election.
Hold up. So someone who was actually involved in trying to undermine the election could be considered for the top law enforcement job in the country. That's what this document is suggesting. And there's more. The list also includes Mike Davis. He's known for some pretty controversial social media posts, where he says things like, we should target Trump's political enemies and use tough tactics against immigrants and the media.
It's almost as if this document is like a collection of people who have been accused of doing something wrong, or they've publicly said they support things that a lot of people would see as ethically questionable at the very least. Are there any other names that you think are important?
Absolutely. There's Mark Paoletta, a former White House lawyer who's close with Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. He even represented Thomas's wife during the January 6th investigations.
So we're seeing connections to some very powerful figures here. And we're also seeing a pattern of individuals who seem okay with pushing the limits of what's considered okay legally and ethically. This is getting really concerning.
It is, and it gets even more complicated when you think about how many members of Trump's own legal team are also on this list for top government positions. For instance, Todd Blanche, Trump's main lawyer, is being considered for Deputy Attorney General, White House counsel, and even FBI director.
Hold on. You're saying the guy defending Trump in multiple cases could end up leading the very agency that might be investigating him. That sounds like a huge conflict of interest waiting to happen. Can you explain what the White House counsel actually does, just for those who might not know?
Sure. The White House counsel is basically the president's main legal advisor. And they advise the White House staff, too. They give advice on a bunch of things, like executive orders, legislation, and ethics rules. And in this case, it makes you question how independent the FBI would really be if someone so close to Trump was in charge.
This whole thing feels like this messy web of potential conflicts of interest and ethical problems.
Yeah, and we're just scratching the surface here. The document also names Stanley Woodward, who represented Trump's valet in the classified documents case. He's also reportedly being considered for White House counsel. This whole document just seems to blur the lines between Trump's personal legal battles and the highest levels of government.
This is serious stuff, but we need to remember this is just a leaked document, not something official. What do you think about how reliable this information is?
You're right. We can't take this as gospel. Sources close to Trump's transition team say that these lists are just preliminary and could change. And they also say that Trump himself hasn't really started formal transition planning.
So we can't take this as a definite plan for what a second Trump administration would do, but it's a really fascinating look at what's going on inside his team and what direction they might go in. What stands out to you as the most concerning part of this document?
I think what's most worrisome isn't just the individuals themselves. It's what might happen if they were all appointed. Imagine a Justice Department run by people who have already shown they're willing to bend the rules, or even break them, to protect Trump and his people. It's a pretty disturbing picture of what a second Trump administration might prioritize.
And it's not just about individuals. This document hints at a bigger plan to change how the White House and law enforcement interact. Can you tell us more about that?
Well, it's just bringing back a bunch of people from Trump's first administration to top jobs at the DOJ. And some of these people have openly said they want to reduce how independent the White House and law enforcement agencies are.
So it's not just about putting loyal people in key positions. It's about changing the whole power structure to give the White House more control over law enforcement. That's chilling, to say the least.
Exactly. And it lines up with some of the stuff Trump's been saying on the campaign trail. He keeps talking about how he wants to go after his political opponents if he gets elected again.
That's right. And we're already seeing people accusing both sides of weaponizing the Justice Department. Can you explain what that actually means?
Basically, weaponizing the Justice Department means using law enforcement to target your political enemies or to achieve your own party's goals instead of just upholding the law fairly. It's a real danger, and we need to pay attention to it.
So we've got this leaked document hinting at a potential power grab, and we have Trump himself saying things that make you worry about how he might use the Justice Department if he's reelected. It's a lot to take in, and it definitely raises the stakes for this election.
It does. And in the middle of all this, Attorney General Merrick Garland has been trying to maintain the image of an unbiased Justice Department.
Right.
How do you think all of this might affect his efforts?
Oh, it puts him in a tough spot, for sure, if Trump is elected again. And some of these people get those top jobs. It could undo all the work Garland has done to rebuild trust in the Justice Department. People might start thinking that the scales of justice are tipped in favor of whoever's in power.
And remember what Senator J.D. Vance said about how important it is to have an attorney general who believes in true equal justice under law. This list of potential candidates seems to go completely against that.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder, if these people are put in these powerful positions, what will that mean for the Justice Department? What will it mean for the rule of law?
Those are questions that every American should be asking right now. We're going to take a quick break, but when we get back, we're going to look even deeper into what these controversial picks might mean and what they could mean for the country.
Right before the break, we were talking about some pretty disturbing possibilities, especially about how the balance of power between the White House and law enforcement might change. You said this leaked document isn't the only sign that this shift could happen. We're also hearing it in Trump's own campaign speeches, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have to remember that this isn't happening in isolation. Trump has said multiple times that if he's reelected, he wants to investigate and prosecute his political opponents. That, combined with this list of potential appointees, paints a pretty worrying picture of how he might use the Justice Department if he gets a second term.
It's like the Justice Department could become a way to get revenge on political enemies. Instead of being a system that treats everyone fairly under the law, what would that mean for regular Americans?
Well, it could make people lose trust in the justice system, that it's fair and impartial. Imagine a world where the law is only applied to certain people, where just disagreeing with the people in power could put you at risk of being investigated or prosecuted. That's a scary thought.
And it's not just about who might get prosecuted. This power shift could also affect how the Justice Department handles investigations into people in power who might have done something wrong. Would there be real accountability? Or would investigations be shut down or changed for political reasons?
That's a legitimate worry. We've already seen how Trump has used his power to go after his critics and try to stop investigations that he didn't like. This document just adds to those concerns and gives us a glimpse of what a second Trump administration might be like.
It's like a huge warning sign flashing, telling us about the dangers ahead. But what can we do? What can we do to protect our democracy and make sure the justice system stays fair and unbiased?
That's the big question. And there aren't any easy answers. But I think the first step is awareness. We need to understand the risks and hold our leaders accountable. We can't just sit back and do nothing.
Speaking of accountability, is there anything in history like a president trying to have this much control over the Justice Department? I mean, haven't presidents always tried to influence legal stuff to some degree?
There have definitely been times when presidents have overstepped their boundaries. But what's really concerning here is that it looks like there's a plan to completely dismantle the rules and safeguards that have always protected the Justice Department's independence. It's a dangerous trend, and we need to fight against it.
Okay, so being aware is important. But what else can we do? Are there any practical things we can do to protect our democracy?
For sure. We can support organizations that are working to protect our democratic institutions and make sure that the rule of law is followed. Groups like the Brennan Center for Justice, the American Civil Liberties Union, ACLU, and Common Cause are doing amazing work in this area, and they need our support more than ever.
The Brennan Center, the ACLU, and Common Cause. Good ones to remember. I bet those organizations have websites where people can go to learn more about their work, right?
Yep. They all have great websites with tons of information about what they do, the projects they're working on, and how people can get involved. You can volunteer, donate, or even just tell other people about them. Every little bit helps.
And what about the media? What can they do in all this?
The media has a super important job to do. They need to hold people in power accountable, fact check what people are saying, and keep the public informed. It's vital that we support real journalism and resist any attempts to silence or discredit the press. A free and independent press is crucial for a democracy to thrive.
It sounds like we all have a part to play in keeping our democracy safe. It's not just the courts or the politicians. We all have a responsibility to stay informed, speak our minds, and hold the people in power accountable.
I couldn't agree more. The future of our democracy depends on citizens being active and engaged, citizens who are willing to stand up for the values they believe in.
And it's not just about fighting against something, it's about fighting for something, too. It's about fighting for a more fair and just society, a society where everyone is treated equally under the law, no matter how rich they are, how much power they have, or their political views.
Well said. And remember that change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time, hard work, and not giving up. But even small actions can make a difference.
That's an encouraging thought. We can't let fear or apathy control us. We have to believe that we can change things. And we have to act on that belief.
Exactly. We the people have the power. We have the power to decide what kind of society we want to live in. We just have to use that power.
This has been a really heavy discussion. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all the potential threats to our democracy. But I also feel a glimmer of hope. Hope that by understanding the challenges, we can work together to overcome them.
I feel that hope too. And I believe that if we work together, we can build a more just and fair society for everyone.
So as we move forward, what should we keep in mind? What are the main takeaways from this deep dive into this leaked document and what it all means?
I think there are a few important things to remember. First, we need to be aware that the Justice Department could be turned into a political tool and that its independence could be eroded. This is a serious threat that we can't ignore.
And second,
we need to understand how important a free and independent press is in holding people in power accountable and keeping the public informed.
And
lastly, we need to remember that we all have a part to play in safeguarding our democracy. It's not just up to the courts or the politicians. It's up to all of us.
Powerful words to remember. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, the role of independent organizations in protecting our democracy. You mentioned the Brennan Center, the ACLU, and Common Cause. Are there any other groups you'd recommend our listeners check out?
Yeah, definitely. The League of Women Voters is a great place to find information about voting rights and making sure elections are fair. And the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund has a long history of fighting for civil rights and racial justice. Those are just a couple of examples. But there are so many other organizations doing incredible work in this area.
The League of Women Voters and the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. Excellent additions to the list.
And remember, you don't have to do everything. Just find something you're passionate about and get involved. Every action, no matter how small, makes a difference.
This has been a really intense and insightful conversation. I feel like I understand the potential dangers facing our democracy so much better now, and I understand the steps we can take to protect it.
I'm glad to hear that, and I want to thank you for having me on for this deep dive. It's been great talking to you about these crucial issues.
The pleasure is all mine. And to our listeners, thank you for coming along on this journey with us. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking.